Hi, on this video, I'll show you 6 ways to buy a business without using your own cash. Hi, I'm Jonathan J, and on this video, I'm going to show you 6 ways to buy a business without using any of your own cash.
And here's the best bit of why you should be buying a business rather than starting a business. You see, when you start a business, it typically requires capital. Now, you might borrow it from a bank, you might have savings of your own, you might borrow it from friends or family, but it requires money. And that money typically takes a long time to repay and is a bit of a millstone around the neck of a new business. But what if I could show you how to buy a business without using any of your own capital, without using anyone else's either? If I could show you how to buy a business without borrowing money from a bank, if I could show you how to buy a business that's up and running and operating that you can take over from the exiting owner without using a penny of cash, wouldn't that be a far more attractive way of getting into business rather than starting a business from scratch and having to borrow money to do so? So that is the primary reason why you should be thinking about buying a business rather than starting a business. You can do it without using or risking any of your own capital. So how do you buy a business without using any of your own cash or capital? Well, here are 5 easy ways to buy a business without using any of your own money. The first situation is where the business is distressed, which means that it's under financial pressure. Maybe it's even losing money, maybe it's got debts. And as a result of doing a £1 deal to buy the business, you just take on the liabilities of the company. Now you might think, well, I don't want liabilities. Why would I want liabilities? Well, this is just a different way of paying for the business. You're allowing the business owner to walk away and sleep better at night, and then you've got the problems that the previous owner had, but you've got fresh eyes, you've got enthusiasm, and you've hopefully got a deal team around you who can solve all the problems. The problems that the owner of the business perceives that they have, you might look at and go, you know what, I know how to solve that, I know someone else who can solve that, and that one isn't a great big deal after all. I can solve all of those problems. But to the business owner themselves, they just see these problems and they just want to get out, and maybe these problems might be small, but they are the straw that broke the camel's back. They've just had enough. And if you can solve all these problems, you can pick up a perfectly good business once the problems are solved for just £1. Now here's the second way you can buy a business without using any of your own cash. You use someone else's. It sounds simple, but there are plenty of people who want to be part of a business acquisition, but don't want to go out and find the business, don't want to negotiate and structure the deal, don't want to take responsibility for the business, but they want to be a shareholder in the company. And maybe they'll buy 20-25% of the shares for a lump sum. Now, that lump sum is the money that you can use to help finance the deal by giving that lump sum to the seller of the business on completion. You see, typically deals are structured in 2 parts. There's a payment on completion, and then there's a payment over a period of time. And the question that many deal makers have is, how do I fund that lump sum, that payment on completion? Well, you get someone else to fund it. Use OPM, use other people's money to fund that initial lump sum payment on completion. And then the balance of the payments over a period of time, are financed through the cash flow of the business, which means that you don't have to find the money from your personal resources. The business itself finances its own acquisition. Number 3, the third method of buying a business without using any of your own cash or capital is to agree a deal structure with the seller of the business that means that you defer 100% of the payment for the company. So let's say the agreed payment is £100,000 or $100,000. You take that £100,000 and you spread it over, let's say, 5 years, which means that you pay the seller of the business £20,000 a year over the next 5 years, which adds up to the £100,000 they were looking for. Now you might be thinking, and quite rightly so, you might be thinking, why would someone do that? Why would they just not take £100,000 on day one if they could? Well, they probably had that business on the market for a year, 18 months, 2 years, sometimes even more. In fact, recently I met an owner of a business, had their business on the market for 6 years and been unable to sell it. So my deal structure where I say, look, I can give you the money that you're looking for, but we'll have to spread those payments over the next few years, was not the ideal structure, but they'd spent 6 years looking for someone who was going to write them a check, and no one had. So I came along as the knight in shining armor and I said, look, I can rescue you from this situation. I will buy your business from you. You can walk away from your business. We just need to structure the deal so I pay you over a period of time. You see, it's not the best deal, but in the absence of all other deals, it is a great deal for the seller of the business. So that's method number 3. Method number 4 is when there is a property involved. So quite often you encounter a business that also owns a property. Now, I'm not particularly interested in the property aspect of the deal. So this is what I do. I find a property investor who will buy the property and I will buy the business. Now, this has to be structured carefully because we've now got a third party involved, but it's all doable. So what happens is that the investor buys the property, the money from the property purchase goes to the seller of the business and the property, the package if you like. So they get that money on day one. I buy the business and the pre-agreed sum for the purchase of the business is then spread over a number of years, which means that the cash flow of the business finances the business part of the acquisition. So look at it from the seller's perspective. They get money on day one from the property sale, and then they get the money for the business paid over the next 3, 4, or 5 years from the cash flow of the business. Now, to be fair, from the seller's perspective, it makes no difference where that money comes from as long as they get the money. That's the 4th method. The 5th method is that you finance the assets of the business to fund the purchase. So let's say the business has some tangible fixed assets which hopefully are unencumbered, but maybe there is still some borrowing on that, but we can deal with that, it's not an issue. And what we do is we get asset-based finance to finance the assets as collateral for the loan inside the business, and then we use that money to pay the seller of the business. Now you might be asking the question, and many people do, how can you get finance on assets that you don't yet own? Well, it's a little bit like me getting a mortgage offer on your property, and I can get that, and I don't own your property yet, but I can get the finance agreed. And then at the point of completion, if I'm buying, to use the property analogy, I'm buying your property, at the point of completion, that finance falls into place, the money's released, and it goes to the seller of the property. It's exactly the same with buying the business using asset-based finance. The asset-based finance is placed upon the assets are there as collateral for the loan, and then the money for the loan is distributed out to the seller of the business. Now, if you do this right, and my deal makers that I train up know how to do this right, then what happens is there is money left over, and that money can then be paid out to the new owner of the business as what we call a deal fee. This means, and this is the beautiful part, you can actually make money when you buy the business on the day you buy the business. And method number 6 of using no money to buy the business is to actually use the money in the bank account of the business as that initial consideration, what we call the payment that's made on completion. So let's say the business has £100,000 in the bank. If the seller of the business took that money out of the bank as a pre-sale dividend, it would probably attract somewhere in the region of 40% tax. So they would lose £40,000 instantly to HMRC. However, if we structure the business consideration to include that £100,000. They can have that £100,000 on day one, but it only attracts in the UK 10% tax, which means that they are £30,000 better off. So the way to pitch this to the owner of the business is that by doing this, they are immediately £30,000 better off by allowing you to use that money in the bank as the initial consideration. Once they get over the mental hurdle of, well, you're using my own money to buy the business, it actually does make a lot of sense. In actual fact, they are now, in this example, £30,000 better off as a result. So there you go. There's 6 methods of buying a business without using any of your own cash or capital and without any risk to you whatsoever.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and click here to watch more videos about buying a business.